I'm going to try and uncover the truth behind these disturbing emails that were sent to Rihanna's home. Rihanna's home was recently targeted by a woman who allegedly sent some really creepy and deeply unsettling emails, and this is one of those stories that instantly gets people talking. The entire situation is disturbing, shocking, and honestly pretty scary when you really stop and think about it. So today, we're going to dive into all the details surrounding what happened, why people are so alarmed, and just how serious this situation may have actually been. Because let's be honest, when you hear that a global superstar like Rihanna had her home targeted by someone sending threatening and disturbing messages, it's not just celebrity gossip anymore. It becomes something much darker. It becomes a real conversation about safety, obsession, privacy, and how far some people are willing to go. And in this case, what happened is seriously unsettling. Apparently, this woman allegedly took it upon herself to send threatening and disturbing emails connected to Rihanna's home. These were not harmless messages. These were not emotional fan letters. These were not even just random hateful comments online that celebrities sadly deal with all the time. No, according to what's been reported, these emails were on a whole different level. We're talking about the kind of messages that would make anyone feel deeply uncomfortable. The kind of messages that would make someone feel unsafe in their own space. The kind of messages that cross a very clear line and turn from creepy behavior into something much more serious. And that's what makes this story so disturbing. It's honestly hard to imagine what must have been going through Rihanna's mind or her team's mind when these emails started coming in. Because your home is supposed to be your safe place. It's supposed to be the one place where you can shut the world out, feel secure, and have some peace. But when someone starts targeting your home with disturbing threats, that sense of safety is instantly shattered. And that's exactly why so many people are reacting so strongly to this story. The woman at the center of this situation reportedly sent emails that were not just strange or obsessive, but deeply troubling in nature. These messages were allegedly threatening, unsettling, and filled with the kind of language that would immediately raise red flags. It's the type of behavior that makes people stop and say, okay, this is not normal. This is dangerous. Because it's one thing for a celebrity to receive intense attention. That sadly comes with fame. But it's another thing entirely when someone becomes so fixated that they begin contacting a celebrity's home with disturbing messages. That's no longer fan behavior. That's no longer just online drama. That's something much more serious. And that's where this story takes a darker turn. From what we understand, these emails weren't just a one-time thing. This reportedly wasn't a random message sent in a moment of anger or confusion. Instead, it seems like this behavior may have gone on for a period of time, which makes it even more unsettling. Because when something happens repeatedly, it starts to show a pattern. And patterns like that are exactly what authorities look for when they're trying to determine whether a threat could escalate. That's the scary part. If someone is willing to repeatedly send disturbing emails to Rihanna's home, then naturally people start asking, what else might this person be willing to do? If she felt bold enough or comfortable enough to go that far, could it have escalated even further? Could this have become even more dangerous? Those are the questions that make this whole situation feel so chilling. And it's not just Rihanna people are thinking about, it's her family, her team, her security staff, and everyone around her. Because when a celebrity's home is targeted, it doesn't just affect that one person. It affects everyone connected to that space. It creates fear, tension, and uncertainty. It forces everyone to be on high alert. That's why this situation was taken so seriously. Now, the exact history between this woman and Rihanna hasn't been fully made clear, and that only adds to the mystery. People want to know, was this someone who had been obsessing for a long time? Was this a person who believed she had some kind of personal connection? Was there a deeper delusion or fixation involved? Because in cases like this, there's often an obsessive element that goes far beyond what the public sees at first. And based on what's been said so far, it definitely seems like there may have been a level of obsession here. Think about it, someone allegedly took the time to craft disturbing messages, direct them toward Rihanna's home, and continue this behavior in a way that ultimately got the attention of authorities. That is not casual behavior. That is not something someone does without being deeply fixated. It suggests intent. It suggests obsession. And most importantly, it suggests a potential threat. That's why the authorities eventually had to get involved. At some point, the situation became serious enough that law enforcement was alerted, and once they reportedly moved quickly. Thankfully, this is where the story shifts slightly from terrifying to at least somewhat reassuring. Because as scary as the situation was, it appears that authorities were able to intervene before things escalated even further. And honestly, that is a huge relief. Not just for Rihanna, but for her team, her loved ones, and of course, her fans. Because nobody wants to imagine a situation like this going any further than it already did. When you hear that someone was allegedly sending threatening or deeply disturbing emails to a celebrity's home, your mind immediately jumps to worst-case scenarios. That's why quick action matters so much. Rihanna, like many celebrities, likely has security measures in place. Her team probably has protocols for dealing with threats, suspicious behavior, and unwanted contact. But even with all of that, situations like this are still deeply unsettling. They're still invasive. They still remind everyone that fame can come with some incredibly dark consequences. And that's something people don't always think about. From the outside, celebrity life can look glamorous, luxurious, and almost untouchable. But stories like this pull back the curtain and reveal a much more uncomfortable reality. Celebrities may live in beautiful homes, have security teams, and travel with protection, but they are still human beings. They still experience fear. They still have private spaces they want to protect. They still deserve to feel safe. And when that safety is threatened, it becomes a serious issue. That's why this story has resonated with so many people. It's not just because it involves Rihanna, a world-famous icon with millions of fans. It's because it taps into something universal, the fear of being targeted in your own home. The fear of being watched, harassed, or threatened by someone whose behavior is unpredictable. That's something anyone can understand, whether they're famous or not. And in Rihanna's case, it's especially alarming because of just how intense the reported behavior was. The emails themselves were reportedly deeply disturbing. While we don't need to repeat every detail, the overall message was clear. These were not harmless communications. These were the kind of emails that crossed a major line and triggered real concern. The content was reportedly threatening enough that it forced people to take action. And when law enforcement gets involved over emails sent to someone's home, that tells you everything you need to know about how serious the situation was. This was not something to ignore. This was not something to laugh off. This was not something to file under celebrity drama and move on from. This was a real threat. Or at the very least, it was perceived as a threat serious enough to require intervention. That distinction matters. Because sometimes people make the mistake of assuming that if no physical harm happened, then maybe it wasn't that serious. But that's not how these situations work. Threatening messages, stalking behavior, obsessive contact, and invasions of privacy are often warning signs. They are often the early stages of something worse. And the reason authorities act quickly in these cases is because waiting too long can have terrible consequences. That's why Rihanna being safe right now is such a major relief. According to reports, the woman was eventually arrested, and that became a major turning point in the story. Her arrest sent a clear message: you cannot harass, threaten, or terrorize someone's celebrity, or not, and expect there to be no consequences. The legal system may not always move instantly, but in this case, it seems authorities recognized the seriousness of the situation and took action. And honestly, that's exactly what should happen. Because there's sometimes this strange idea online that celebrities are somehow public property. That because they're famous, people can say anything, do anything, show up anywhere, or invade their lives however they want. But that is simply not true. Celebrities are not public property. Rihanna may be a superstar, but she is still a person. She still has boundaries. She still has a right to privacy. She still has a right to feel safe in her own home. And no level of fame should ever make someone a target for disturbing behavior. That's why this case matters beyond just the headlines. It forces a bigger conversation about celebrity safety and the ways obsession can spiral into something dangerous. We've seen time and time again that when fans, or people pretending to be fans, become too fixated, things can go very wrong. Sometimes it starts with messages. Sometimes it starts with online comments. Sometimes it starts with delusional thinking or an imagined connection. And then, before anyone realizes how serious it is, it escalates. That's exactly why so many people are reacting so strongly here. The idea that someone allegedly felt emboldened enough to send creepy and threatening emails directly tied to Rihanna's home is incredibly unsettling. It shows a level of confidence, boldness, or instability that naturally makes people worry about what could come next. If someone is willing to cross that line, what other lines might they be willing to cross? That question is what makes this story feel so heavy. And even though authorities reportedly stepped in before anything worse happened, it doesn't erase how violating the entire experience must have been. Just knowing that someone was out there focusing on you, targeting your home, and sending disturbing messages would be enough to shake anyone up. Imagine having to wonder whether someone is watching you. Imagine having to question whether a stranger might show up. Imagine having to rely on security updates and legal steps just to feel normal again. That's a horrible thing for anyone to go through. And again, it reminds us that behind the fame, behind the headlines, behind the fashion, the music, the brand deals, and the public image, Rihanna is still a real person living in the real world. A person who can be scared. A person who can be threatened. A person who can be deeply affected by something like this. That human side is important, because it's easy for people online to reduce stories like this to entertainment. But when you really look at what allegedly happened here, it's not entertaining at all. It's disturbing. It's invasive. It's unsettling. And it's a serious reminder of the risks that can come with massive fame. And sadly, Rihanna is far from the only celebrity who has had to deal with this kind of behavior. Over the years, we've seen countless celebrities deal with stalking, threatening messages, home invasions, trespassers, and obsessive harassment. It's one of the darker sides of celebrity culture that doesn't get talked about enough. People see the fame and the fortune, but they don't always see the emotional toll of constantly having to protect yourself from strangers who feel entitled to access you. That's a terrifying reality. In many cases, celebrity security isn't just about paparazzi or crowd control. It's about real protection. It's about making sure that someone who has become fixated doesn't get close enough to do harm. It's about screening threats, tracking suspicious patterns, and taking action before a situation escalates. And in Rihanna's case, it sounds like those systems may have done exactly what they were supposed to do. The authorities were alerted. The situation was taken seriously. The woman was located. And from what we understand, she was arrested before things could go any further. That is the best possible outcome in a story like this. Because the alternative is what nobody wants to think about. And while the public may never know every single detail of what was in those emails, or exactly how long this had been going on, the fact that it reached the level of law enforcement involvement tells us enough. Whatever was happening was serious. Serious enough to trigger concern. Serious enough to warrant intervention. Serious enough that Rihanna's safety became the priority. And that's exactly how it should be. It also raises another important question. How do we as a society handle obsession when it turns dangerous? Because there's a difference between being a fan and becoming fixated. There's a difference between admiration and entitlement. There's a difference between supporting someone's work and believing you have the right to invade their personal life. And somewhere in stories like this, those lines get crossed in really disturbing ways. Sometimes people who become obsessed with celebrities create entire fantasies in their minds. They convince themselves they have a connection, a mission, a grievance, or some kind of special access. And when reality doesn't match that fantasy, the behavior can become erratic, threatening, or dangerous. That's why stories like Rihanna's are more than just tabloid headlines. They're warnings. Warnings about what can happen when obsession is ignored. Warnings about why boundaries matter. Warnings about why threatening behavior must always be taken seriously. And honestly, if there's one good thing that comes out of a situation like this, it's that it reminds people not to dismiss red flags. Disturbing emails are not harmless. Threatening language is not just words. Repeated contact tied to someone's home is not just weird. These things matter. They matter a lot. And thankfully, in this case, it seems like those warning signs were recognized in time. The woman's arrest was a major moment in this story. Not just because it brought temporary relief, but because it showed that action can be taken before a situation spirals out of control. That's important. It sends a message that there are consequences for crossing these lines. And for celebrities, that kind of action matters, because it helps restore at least some sense of safety. But even then, the emotional impact of something like this doesn't just disappear overnight. Even after an arrest, there's still the aftermath. There's still the stress. There's still the fear. There's still the lingering thought of, what if? What if authorities hadn't acted quickly? What if the messages had escalated further? What if this person had taken things offline in an even more dangerous way? Those questions don't just vanish. And that's why this story is sticking with so many people. Because it's one of those cases where the headline sounds shocking, but the reality behind it is even more disturbing. A woman allegedly targeting Rihanna's home with creepy, threatening emails is not just dramatic. It's deeply unsettling. It's invasive. It's dangerous. And it reminds everyone just how vulnerable even the biggest stars can be. No amount of fame makes someone immune to fear. No amount of success makes someone immune to being targeted. And no amount of celebrity status should ever make it acceptable for someone to violate another person's safety. That's the core of this story. Rihanna faced a serious and deeply disturbing threat, and it appears that only because of quick action by authorities was the situation stopped before it could become something even worse. That's the part that should matter most. Yes, people will talk about the drama. Yes, people will focus on the shocking details. Yes, headlines will make it sound sensational. But underneath all of that is a very simple truth. Someone allegedly crossed a terrifying line, and Rihanna's safety was put at risk. That should never be normalized. It should never be brushed off. And it should absolutely be taken seriously every single time. So, to sum it all up, Rihanna's home was reportedly targeted by a woman who allegedly sent deeply disturbing and threatening emails. The messages were serious enough to raise major concerns. Authorities were alerted, and the woman was eventually arrested. The entire situation is a chilling reminder of just how fragile celebrity safety can really be, and how quickly obsession can become something much darker. It's a scary story. It's a disturbing story. And it's one that reminds us that behind every celebrity headline is a real human being who deserves peace, privacy, and protection. Rihanna may be one of the most famous women in the world, but at the end of the day, she still deserves to feel safe in her own home just like anyone else. And thankfully, it seems that in this case, the warning signs were recognized before things went any further. But the fact that it got this far in the first place, that's the part that really leaves people shaken. If you've got any thoughts on celebrity safety, obsession, or how situations like this should be handled, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest celebrity news, shocking headlines, and all the stories everyone's talking about, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for the watching and subscribe.